Hello, my name is Ronnie Russell, and I'm an educational consultant at the Patton Harrisburg office. Welcome to this informational video meant to provide you with the most relevant information regarding restraints and restraint reporting. These are the objectives for this session. We will look at an overview of restraint reporting into the risk system. We will highlight regulatory requirements and the investigatory process. And we'll also highlight preventive measures. Before we begin, I want to provide you a very clear context with regard to restraints. Restraints are a measure of absolute last resort. They're only to be used in emergency situations, severe aggressive or self-injurious behavior that is a clear and present danger to self or others, and restraints are not to be used for punishment or incidents of non-compliance. In line with the context from the previous slide, this is the definition of restraint: the application of physical force, with or without the use of any device, for the purpose of restraining the free movement of a student's or eligible young child's body. Restraints to control acute or episodic aggressive or self-injurious behavior may be only used when the student is acting in a manner as to be a clear and present danger to himself or herself, to other students, or to employees, and only when less restrictive measures and techniques have proven to be or are less effective. A mechanical restraint includes the following information: a device or equipment used to restrict a student's movement. It does not include one that is prescribed by a medical professional or related service professional, and the device is only used for its intended purpose. And remember, staff must be trained. It is also critical to know that prone restraints are not permissible in Pennsylvania. This is a restraint in which the student is held face down. This is not allowed under any circumstance. Because restraining a student is among the most intense and potentially dangerous responses to a student's behavior, there is a training requirement that LEAs must follow. LEAs have the primary responsibility for ensuring that positive behavior support programs are in accordance with this chapter, including the training of personnel for the use of specific procedures, methods, and techniques, having a written policy and procedure on the use of positive behavior support techniques, and obtaining parental consent prior to the use of restraints or intrusive procedures as provided in this subsection. The use of restraints may only be included in a student's or eligible young child's IEP when the following conditions apply: the restraint is utilized with specific component elements of positive behavior support. The restraint is used in conjunction with the teaching of socially acceptable alternative skills to replace problem behavior. Staff are authorized to use the procedure and have received the staff training required. And there is a plan in place for eliminating the use of restraint through the application of positive behavior support. Subsequent to a referral to law enforcement for students with disabilities who have positive behavior support plans, an updated functional behavior assessment and positive behavior support plan shall be required. If there is law enforcement, an SRO or school police officer or community police officer involved with the restraint causing the student to be handcuffed, tased, or charged under a safe school violation, the Bureau of Special Education will contact the LEA and an investigation will occur if necessary. The use of restraints to control the aggressive behavior of an individual student or eligible young child shall cause the LEA to notify the parent of the use of restraint and shall cause a meeting of the IEP team within 10 school days of the inappropriate behavior causing the use of restraints, unless the parent, after written notice, agrees in writing to waive the meeting. At this meeting, the IEP team shall consider whether the student or eligible young child needs a functional behavioral assessment, reevaluation, a new or revised positive behavior support plan, or a change of placement to address the inappropriate behavior. LEAs shall maintain and report data on the use of restraints as prescribed by the Secretary. The report shall be reviewed during cyclical compliance monitoring conducted by the Department. In Pennsylvania, we use a web-based reporting system titled RISC, Restraint Information System of Collection. The RISC system provides electronic notification to BSE staff each time a restraint is entered into the system and under specific circumstances that generate a restraint review request, otherwise known as R3. Restraints are then reviewed by staff. Local, regional, and state-level reports are also reviewed by the BSE to address systemic needs for technical assistance. R3s and serious injury may generate a need for clarification, investigation, and/or corrective action by the BSE. Based on patterns of student or school-level data, BSE can increase its oversight of schools. Corrective action may include data entry, staff training, policy and procedure revision, technical assistance requirements, on-site visitations, referrals to educator misconduct, or a required letter of assurance. Now we look at what the RISC system looks for and what different scenarios create a need for an investigation. The Bureau of Special Education investigates the bulleted items listed here. In reviewing the RISC reports, LEAs have reported into the RISC system. Anytime one of these circumstances occur, the RISC system notifies the Bureau of Special Education advisor assigned to the LEA. The advisor makes contact with the LEA to discuss the concern of that reported restraint and to determine if a resolution plan is needed. Sometimes there may be a clerical error in inputting the information. Sometimes the data or investigation shows a systemic issue, which requires more training by the district. And sometimes there may be a need for a district-wide revamping of policy and training. The investigation document the RISC team sends out is called a Restraint Review Request, or R3. Some of the bulleted items listed here are mechanical, or when the student has an electric shock intervention or taser, a restraint of a special education student involving a law enforcement charge, an excessive restraint longer than 60 minutes, patterns of excessive holds of a specific student or holds that have not decreased over time, a high waiver count without reconvening an IEP meeting, staff not being trained, serious injury warranting an investigation, excessive law enforcement involved in restraints with staff not involved, multiple injuries occurring with students and/or staff, and law enforcement intervention without reconvening an IEP meeting. Note that each LEA receives a pen link each quarter. The pen link is sent to all LEAs noting the regulatory requirement to report, quarterly restraint reporting timelines including zero restraint reporting and restraint reporting occurring during extended school year, a direct telephone line and a RISC resource account, and a RISC website address including a webinar link on how to report. Pen links are sent to superintendents of districts and CEOs of charter and cyber charter schools. It is up to that person to disseminate the information to whomever may need that information in the LEA. Each district or charter school may have a different internal procedure regarding who actually enters restraint information into the RISC system. Again, you'll want to be sure you are clear on that procedure by talking with your special education administrator. The regional BSE advisor also updates LEAs regularly at point of contact meetings and with electronic communications. This is one of the pages that could be seen when entering restraint information. As you can see, this report includes information regarding the antecedent, the behavior, and the de-escalation technique that was implemented. The antecedent is the setting and/or circumstance that occurred prior to the behavior of concern. What circumstances occurred that triggered the problem behavior? Please be specific. An example of an antecedent: the student was in art class. The teacher asked the student to put the iPad away and to get a marker and paper to begin the assignment. This section is very important as studying patterns of the antecedents may provide the school entities ideas on how to intervene differently, as well as the teaching of socially acceptable alternative skills to replace problem behaviors. The next section, the behaviors section, needs to be filled out as well. This section addresses the problem behavior. What was the behavior or behaviors that were a clear and present danger to self or others? Please be specific. An example of a behavior: the student repeatedly told the teacher, "No, I want to play on my iPad." The student banged his head or her head on the desk with high intensity, then hit the teacher 3 times in the stomach. The student threw the iPad at a peer and then eloped from the classroom. In the third box, you should provide documentation of the lesser restrictive measures or de-escalation techniques you tried before a restraint had to be implemented. An example of de-escalation techniques: the teacher utilized a calm voice, if-then statements, and proximity control. An additional tip: do not use names of students and staff. Avoid acronyms, and be specific and detailed. At the top of this slide are 4 things to guide how you word your entry into the risk system. Succinctly tell the story. Be specific. Use observable terms. And again, do not use the student's name, only the PA's secure ID. LEAs must report to BSE when a restraint results in a serious injury to a student and/or staff person. A serious injury is considered any injury that requires medical attention outside the school where the incident occurred. Email notifications are to be sent within 24 hours to the email listed. PDE strongly recommends the use of restraint training, including an emphasis on establishing instructional environments that promote student self-regulation of behavior and reduces the need for restraint. This includes staff training on how to effectively de-escalate student behavior when it occurs. PDE also strongly recommends LEAs establish a parent session outlining the emergency procedures for response to dysregulated behavior. School-wide environmental and procedural content for training should be considered. Training considerations would be to establish a school-wide commitment to reduce the use of restraints, establish a school-wide multi-tiered positive behavior support framework, establish a highly trained crisis team external from the classroom, train all staff on risks associated with the use of physical interventions, including the signs of physical distress, potential asphyxiation, and the psychological effects of restraint. Train all staff on signs of student-staff anxiety and distress to prevent escalation of behavior. Implement instructional practices to teach students self-regulation and co-regulation strategies. Some additional school-wide training considerations. Ensure all staff have knowledge of known triggers for restraint-producing behaviors in individual students. Demonstrate and model de-escalation techniques and other alternatives to physical restraint. Train all staff on how to depersonalize student-adult conflict and avoid power struggles. Train all staff so that there is an understanding of the legal, ethical, and policy aspects of physical restraint use. Now we will talk about some environmental training considerations. Establish an instructional environment where engagement and positive measures form the basis of a behavior management framework. Assess the educational environment during student escalation to ensure safety by removing objects, staff, or students. Proactively establish a physically safe environment that considers reduction of easily accessible sharp objects and protrusions to the maximum extent possible. Limit or eliminate configurations that provide climbing opportunities, use of protective coverings for heating systems, outlets, and electrical connections, and keep things within the parameters of local fire and safety codes. Closely monitor or eliminate egress points in and outdoors. Now let's look at some procedural training considerations. Ensure designated staff are trained on PDE's Restraint Guidelines Manual. Ensure designated staff are trained on safe techniques for the use of physical restraints. Identification of the phases of escalation and matching strategies to de-escalate behavior at the various phases. Providing training on regulatory and procedural requirements of effective individualized functional behavior assessments and positive behavior support plans. Some additional procedural training considerations. Develop a staff protocol to be implemented before, during, and after an incident of a restraint. Implementation of the protocol should include a debrief of the incident, ongoing staff training, review of effectiveness, and revision of procedures as appropriate. Establish and implement effective and timely procedures to communicate with parents regarding the use of restraint and the need for a subsequent IEP meeting. Establish and implement clear documentation procedures of the incident and compliance with notification procedures. And lastly, conduct post-intervention debriefing with the student and staff.